it should achieve essentially worldwide adoption. I think most Bitcoiners can understand that and generally agree with that in some way. And I even think a lot of capital allocators can kind of understand that logic. They may not agree necessarily that Bitcoin is the best money. They may have questions about, well, why is it Bitcoin and not something else? But they can kind of get on board with like something being broken in the traditional fiat system and there needing to be some kind of solution.
Over the past few years, Arnold has delved into the intricacies of Bitcoin and its implications for the global financial system. His investment thesis revolves around the belief that if Bitcoin indeed stands as the superior form of money, its widespread adoption is inevitable. We've seen this repeatedly throughout history. Whenever two financial systems exist in parallel, the system backed by harder money always wins out. In this exploration, we unravel Arnold's perspective, emphasizing not just the fundamental principles of Bitcoin, but also the profound consequences it holds for industries far beyond the Bitcoin space.
If we believe about Bitcoin ends up being true and that it is the best money, then it will inexorably achieve adoption in some form or fashion. We can talk about what that ultimately looks like. But then a lot of people, both Bitcoiners and not, don't take the next step to saying, like, if that's true, like, let's just assign some probability to it and say that that's true. There are meaningful derivative implications for companies that are providing products and services that will enable that growth of Bitcoin adoption. If there are 8 billion people ultimately using Bitcoin in some way, there will necessarily be massive industries built up around enabling that. And then existing industries themselves will also have to meaningfully adapt to that reality, because money is, half of every transaction. Every economic interaction at virtually any scale is downstream of money and needs to leverage money in some way. And if Bitcoin becomes the global reserve currency and essentially, the apex predator of money that we expect it to be, existing industries that currently have nothing to do with Bitcoin will have to reckon with that reality and adopt tools and services to utilize it, and also probably see various elements of their businesses transformed by that fact. So basically what I was kind of getting at was, I think there's a tendency, even among Bitcoiners, to look at Bitcoin companies as kind of like a cottage industry. It's kind of like, a cute little set of like, investments here, investments there. There's like, this lightning companies, they're kind of cool. They're doing something. And like this financial services company, like I like them, I use them, whatever. But I don't think people like fully understand that, like, if we're right about what Bitcoin is going to be, then it's going to be far from, Bitcoin companies will be far from a cottage industry. It'll be basically every company, right? So the surface area of kind of what's investable as a Bitcoin infrastructure investor just gets bigger and bigger every year. We expand out in these concentric circles from like financial services and payments, kind of the logical stuff, to like oil and gas, as it leverages kind of Bitcoin mining, to consumer applications. We're seeing that maybe with like Primal, with Fold, some other companies in our portfolio that don't actually have anything to do with Bitcoin, or didn't initially, and came to us because they kind of saw an opportunity to integrate it in some way. And so you just kind of, I think we'll see a lot more of those as we go, as Bitcoin adoption increases. And so just kind of waking people up to that reality, both like capital allocators that we talk to, but also just anyone who's interested in Bitcoin in general. Like, there's a whole set of derivative implications that you should be paying attention to if you think Bitcoin is going to become, what we think it can be. It comes down to Bitcoin being superior money. And I don't think that it's possible to insulate yourself from the consequences of what that means if you're a self-interested economic actor. It's, I kind of, in the piece, walk through just like a summary table of all of the, characteristics that make Bitcoin superior money on pretty much any dimension you can think of. It is. We have a thesis. I think anyone who holds Bitcoin has this thesis in some way. We certainly have it at 1031 that ultimately all monetary goods will converge to one, because everyone has to constantly face an A/B test of, do I want to hold Bitcoin or something else? And if in every iteration of that A/B test, Bitcoin wins out, you won't want to hold 3 other monies or 5 other monies or 10 other monies that are inferior. You'll want to just hold Bitcoin. You'll want to just hold cash balances in Bitcoin. And you can do that permissionlessly. You can do that fairly cheaply. You can access it from anywhere in the world. Obviously, there are frictions in different countries and different jurisdictions that we can get into, but the long-term result is kind of unavoidable if we're right about Bitcoin being the superior money that it is. And I think you've seen historical examples of that play out across history. Bitcoin Standard, Saifedean goes through those in great detail. But I just think it's very difficult to envision a world where Bitcoin continues to do what it has done and continues to maintain all the characteristics that it has had and doesn't just achieve more and more adoption in a one-way function year over year. It is a paradigm shift. It is, I think a point I make in the article here is like, it's also not super intuitive. Like when you first come to it. And that's a lot of the reason that, people say you need like multiple touch points with Bitcoin before you take it seriously and want to start adopting it. But that is also the fact that it's not necessarily at a protocol level, at like the barest level, the most intuitive thing is also like an argument for, not an argument against its quality as money, but an argument for the products and services and companies and applications that can be built up and will be built up to make it more intuitive. I reference in this article that I make a lot of parallels to the internet. There's the famous Today Show clip, which is now like hilarious today, right? Of Katie Couric and the other hosts of the Today Show in like 1994, asking their producer like, "What is internet?" Not like what is the internet, asking what the @ symbol is, right? And it was completely foreign to like fairly like mainstream, well-educated, wealthy people at the pinnacle of Western society, sitting in a studio in Manhattan, right? And so you could look at that and say, well, obviously, like this thing is like hyper unintuitive. Who's ever going to use this? It seems like it's just for criminals. Like I don't like even get the mechanics behind it. Like why would I want it? And then like less than 15 years later, everyone's walking around with one of these, right? There's the classic quote that we overestimate technology's potential in the short term and underestimate in the long term. It's a bit of a cliche, but like it's proven exactly right with the internet, and I think that'll be the case with Bitcoin too.
Today's video is sponsored by Stampseed. Don't store your Bitcoin in cold storage without stamping your seed phrase on an indestructible titanium plate. Stampseed is fireproof, rust-proof, impact-proof, and easy to hide. It has no loose parts and will give you ultimate peace of mind that your Bitcoin is safe and sound for the long term. Click the link in the description below for 15% off your stamping kit. Welcome to Bit Intelligence. We are committed to bringing you top-notch Bitcoin-only content, twice weekly. Doing this is quite a lot of work. If you are enjoying it and you'd like to support us in making more of these videos, subscribe to our channel and hit that bell icon. If you are willing to go a step further, consider contributing to our Lightning wallet on Geyser to help us get the funding we need to keep bringing you these videos. You can also join our channel here on YouTube for as low as $2.99 per month. Okay, back to the video.
When we bucket investments, it's generally kind of like at a high level financial services. So that can be custody, lending, Bitcoin-backed lending, any kind of asset management service that leverages Bitcoin, Lightning roughly, and like layer twos generally, and we'll see how those develop. But right now, mostly focused on kind of payments technology, but increasingly there will be other applications there too. Mining infrastructure. So that's not really so much. We do have some kind of prop mining investments where a company is just actually a Bitcoin miner, but also a lot of investments that are in kind of the picks and shovels of like the infrastructure necessary for Bitcoin mining. And then there's kind of security infrastructure, which you'd think of as like any kind of hardware or software stack that allows you to actually use Bitcoin securely, privately. So, CoinKite we're invested in, hardware wallets, Node hardware and software, and then consumer applications broadly. So I mentioned, Fold, Primal. We're in a company called StatMuse, which is an interesting one because I referenced them earlier. They're not really a Bitcoin company in a meaningful way yet. They're a sports knowledge database, basically. It's growing like crazy, but the founder, is a Bitcoiner and wanted to bring us onto the cap table to help him integrate Bitcoin in different ways and just kind of talk to him about his strategy there. So they're an early example of the kinds of companies that I think we'll be seeing a lot more of companies that are not really Bitcoin companies, but that want to leverage it in some way. But those are like the five major buckets across which we invest, and we're like roughly evenly allocated across all those. But it's basically, as you think of like that first tier of like picks and shovels, it's anything that makes Bitcoin easier to use, or introduces it to the traditional financial system, kind of bridges the traditional financial system to Bitcoin. And like I said, if we're right about where Bitcoin's going, there's no way to think of a world where Bitcoin does what we think it can do, where companies like that are also don't benefit dramatically from growing demand for their services, to allow people to actually use Bitcoin in better and more efficient ways. As it relates to any company that's trying to use Bitcoin to monetize content, like whether that's Fountain or any other, the first thing is you're bringing in a whole, like to your point on PubKey, you've got a whole set of embedded users that will show up right away just to be able to use Bitcoin. But you're bootstrapping kind of away from the cold start problem to you've got like a community that you can start leveraging. You'll see, I think, a long tail of creators migrate to platforms like a Fountain, like a Primal, to better monetize content in a way that they couldn't on, say, like a YouTube or Spotify. We're not invested in Wavelake, but they're kind of also an example of providing a place for just a long tail of creators that have very little ability to get meaningfully paid on traditional platforms, but through direct audience engagement via whether it's Zaps or Sat streaming, they actually can. That's like very early days, but all it really takes, I think, for any of those platforms, any of those applications to kind of go parabolic is one or two big creators, one or two big artists to take interest and move content there and actually realize that the economics to them can be a lot more attractive there versus on traditional platforms, or even just additive, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be an either or, but if they can, have content on a platform and get directly paid without, a cut to an extractive middleman, and they avoid potential censorship of the content they want to make, or gating of the content that they want to make, then it's just additive to what they are doing on other traditional platforms.
It is evident that the future of Bitcoin extends into every corner of our economy. It's not merely about Bitcoin companies or investments, it's about a paradigm shift that will impact every facet of our economic interactions. The trajectory of Bitcoin adoption, if true to Arnold's vision, will reshape industries and force existing players to adapt or face obsolescence. The metamorphosis from a small cult industry to a global economic force underscores the transformative potential of Bitcoin.